Nice. Okay. Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Ask Me Anything session. It's Michael Smart here from the Busselton Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Unfortunately, we've suffered a few little technical difficulties that might be storm-related outside this perfect picture that I have in my background. It's pretty chaotic out there. So we are going to record our conversation that we are having live, and we will then post this afterwards. We've sent a message out, so if you've had any questions during this time, we'll get to them and try to answer them through our conversation. But joining me this week is, as ever, Matt Carlson from Loop 2. Thanks so much for being our co-host.
Great to be here. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, and we'll get to those technical difficulties next week. Likely we'll have had those solved. And this week we're really fortunate to have Sam Ninnis and Jo Edmund, local business people here. Jo and Sam, hi, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi, and thank you for having us here today.
Yes, we've been following you guys over these last weeks during the COVID pandemic, and I think it's really timing now to have a little catch up as well, and not only hear about how you're going in businesses as well, but also get your expert opinion for those other folks out in our local economy. So it'd be great just to give us a little bit of a background. Not many folks, we're trying to connect the dots here in the community, and there's so many of us doing so many things. And I think it's great that we can just draw and raise up a little bit of attention. I like, it's perfect who we got in the background. That's
I've got a cup of tea, one of our wonderful
cup of tea is good. Yeah. Cup of tea is always perfect. But I'll start off first, Jo Edmund from Core Psychology, just down the road here on Caves Road. How has it been for you guys, during these last 2 months, I guess?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's obviously been, I think everyone's riding the roller coaster. So when everything first hit, there was obviously the community feeling that shock. So, and adjusting as a business to how you actually want to manage, which was, okay, legislation's changing. I think every business felt this, you have to do this, there's new processes to put in place. But I think, like maybe Sam's business as well, we quickly adapted to the telehealth services as well. And because we obviously wanted community to feel safe, because this is, the psychology space is such a safe space that we thought, well, we can do telehealth. We've got experience with this kind of service. So we've just kind of, we'll keep that going now until I guess we get different kind of directives and from community and I guess looking at needs. So so we're adapting, and it's just really nice to be able to offer our service and stay connected as well, and know that this is what we've actually trained for, psychology. It's kind of like our duty to support community. So I guess calling on businesses or people to go, well, what's my duty? Why am I doing this? And, find that place to be able to, work with what your skill set is. So we're going great.
Yeah, and it's a few little adaptations you mentioned there as well, obviously moving to telehealth. And about those adaptations and how things are going, Sam at Foodlosophy, few little tweaks, few little changes, but maybe you could also let us know, maybe with your guys' mission, the way that you guys started out, maybe those almost hypotheses or assumptions that you were making about the market that was coming out, and maybe the way that things would change in the future, maybe you could just let us know a little bit about how you guys came to be Foodlosophy and your mission, and then maybe how that has almost adapted or maybe even
it's helped
conjoined. It's almost converged with the pandemic.
It's sort of like, it's like that moment where everyone goes, So I don't know, Dan and I have been together now for 9-10 years, and we're both foodies by heart. Dan's a chef, has been a chef for over 25 years, and I'm not in the hospitality industry prior to this, but I grew up in a household where food was everything, and you ate at the table, and food brought us together as a family, and it's what you looked forward to on weekends, because rellies would come over or friends would drop by and go, hey, do you want to just stay for tea? You're here anyway. And I suppose the role that food plays in your life and how it can, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like heal a broken heart almost. And yeah, so just that feeling and that philosophy that food surrounds, we felt was really sort of starting to die a little bit in today's day and age, where every second day you heard about a new diet trend, or you heard about, you know, oh, don't eat this food, eat that food. And there was just so much communication happening and so much, I don't know, scientific stuff surrounding food that it lost its essence and it lost its meaning in the everyday life. And we just really wanted to pull that back. And, you know, technology moves forward every day, and it's sort of pulling people, as much as it's connecting people, it's pulling people apart. So for us, the dinner table was always where you came back together. And yeah, it was always a big part of our life. So that was a really big reason for starting Foodlosophy, to try and recreate and rebuild that culture within our local community. But also, we both grew up in the heart of Sydney, so hustle and bustle and all that sort of jazz. And we've been obviously lucky enough to move down here and, you know, enjoy a slower pace of life and regional life. And there's so much food that surrounds us, and we just sort of felt like, being in a regional town, people needed to be a little bit more connected to the food that grows on our doorstep. So that was another reason as well for Foodlosophy, and trying to connect local produce, local community, that sort of thing. We've obviously both been in business our whole working lives. My dad was a business owner as well, so that I've only ever known that sort of thing. Yeah, and then just really wanting to see something in town that had that mission and that goal to build local business and really like have that full circle, you know. So the reason we chose our logo of that never ending, because when you support us, we support another local business, which supports another local business, which supports a farmer, which, you know, that always, that continuous sort of life cycle. And that's the same with food. You know, you grow food, you eat food, you compost food, and it continues to go. So that, I suppose, in a nutshell, is why we created Foodlosophy and what Foodlosophy is in a nutshell. Yeah, and then I don't know, we've just we created the goal of what we wanted to see in the future, of more people connected in that way, more people understanding how to grow their own food, prepare their own food, because again, that's a little bit lost. Yeah, and then it's just evolved over the last 18 months, and right now during this pandemic, I think food has become the heart of a lot of people every day. You know, you're stuck at home, what else do you do but jump in the kitchen? Yeah, so it's, I don't know, everything we do is sort of like risen to, hey, this is exactly why we're here right now. So
it's an amazing story. So many points to touch on there, from a business perspective, probably also from a psychological perspective as well, Jo, where, I mean, we're getting into almost, you know, visualization techniques, but it's also something where we talk about that in business. If we're setting a goal, what does the world look like sort of in 1-2 years, is something that I often work quite strongly with business customers as well. And being able to also create a picture of that, a visualization for yourself. Is that something, Jo, that you'd kind of, you'd see, or almost these sorts of techniques as well? Is that giving folks a little bit of hope on what the other side could look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when we're talking, first of all, about, you know, what is our narrative now, and what we want our narrative to be, our story, whether it's a family, whether it's a business, on the other side of this, we can actually start to create that. And what the unconscious mind knows, what we know in neuro, you know, science, neuropsychotherapy, and also positive psychology, two of the frameworks we work from, is that you can have that mindset and that belief to go, okay, well, what do we want to create? And that's the first start to then hope really fits into that we were talking about before, Matt, as well. If we have the hope as well, we can actually really build those strengths, because people have hope. That means that they're more likely to attain the goals they set out to actually go for as well. So they all link so beautifully together, all of those concepts. And I heard then also about social connections, so all the key ingredients to health and well-being from a psychological or physical level. You were kind of connecting and threading through that story there of, you know, of nourishing people, bringing people together, forming those links as well with hope. There were just so many threads, so lots of psychology in that story. Yeah. And how we can visualize it. So it's a huge, if it's not in business, if it's not in sports psychology or individual goals, where we first have that vision, that's it. You know, the 200-meter distance runner, what do they visualize? Crossing the line, the sweat, you know, the tears, the cheers, all of those things. So they have that first, and then set the goals. What are those small little things I can do each day towards that as well? So a lot of,
and it's interesting. It's interesting, Jo, as we talk about almost, you know, at this moment where we probably, and most folks, not just in business, but in our community, have traveled through maybe different mental states right now. And, you know, a team like Dan and Sam here at Foodlosophy are kind of, because they've had the foresight almost and created that vision, not sure how much this time has caused them or had them almost themselves personally pulled away from that center. You know, it's very centering when you hold on to those values and that philosophy, that foodlosophy. Is that something that for these guys for well, not just patients but customers out there right now who may have gone through a few different phases? Could you talk us through some of those phases that you may have seen over the last weeks, and how could we be able to zoom back out so that we could actually think, okay, can I breathe out? What do I want to visualize in 3 months? What do I want to visualize in 9 months? Regardless of my cash flow, regardless of my customer situation.
Well, I think there's a few things. I'll talk through like the different, I guess, maybe responses. But I think it's really important for people to really start to sit with their values right now. What are my values? What are my strengths? Because what we know is that if somebody's value of health and well-being, yet they're not moving, or they're not, that's their highest value, or they're not actually, they're knocking back at the packet of, 12 stubbies. A lot of people are moving towards those things because they're just trying to manage right now. And so you go, well, what are my highest values? Am I living closely with that? And that goes into your passion, and I could really hear that as well. So you want to start, and that's what you can ground yourself in. And if you go, well, if all of these things align and I'm doing exactly what I set out to do, there's not going to be the dissonance, which is the anxiety, the stress and depression that we see as well. So I think that's a beautiful story, what you just shared as well, that actually shows that and how we can come back to that, because a value could be, well, family is really important. Okay, well, how am I intentionally living that value today? We can start to ask those questions, and it could be the family meal, or it could be, yeah, actually I'm spending too much time on social media. And they're tiny little things that just bring us closer to who we want to be. And so they're the really grounding things too. So we can actually do little things like that every day for well-being. But going back to your question, I guess, about what have we noticed? We noticed at first, obviously, the shock, the grief, that intense kind of stress. And people, what we fundamentally know from a neuroscience perspective is that when people are in that kind of space of stress, they sit in a different place, like I guess the impulse brain, that fight, flight, freeze. It means they're not operating from here, this prefrontal smart brain, we call it, where they make good decisions, problem solve, rationalization. And we know that from the panic buying and things like that, there was a real social contagion to fear and all of those responses. And it took some of the really grounded people. And I think if we can start social contagion with compassion and reaching out and things like that, it calms down. It's a powerful predictor of calming down people's brains, slowing down, the smiling, the reaching out. And we see, I think if we see businesses even trying to somehow come from that model of, yes, we're all struggling, I'm struggling too, but how can I help you with this? We'll change it. And that's what I saw people starting to do. And I think it took people, so they say in trauma when they study it, there's kind of 3 levels, I guess, of stress and anxiety that there'll be people on a low level, so maybe tier 1 they might say, which is probably people functioning at business, like looking around, because we have to, the brain is set to protect itself, right? We've got to be looking and going, what's coming next? You know, if we weren't doing that, we wouldn't be safe. We'd go out and step on a snake or something like that. So all of us are probably operating from that. And we can be easily triggered into a tier 2 or a tier 3, which is obviously where we get, you know, more mood disorders or anxiety disorders and things like that. So I've kind of seen people move through some of that. And I think people are starting, what I'm noticing is that because there's this calmness, there's a loosening up of some of the, I guess, rules and what we can do, so to speak, that people are starting to feel safe. We want to feel safe. Because when they start to feel safe, and even if it's just, all right, I'm safe in this room right now, like I've got a roof over my head, I've got clothes, I've got these things, I can calm down that worry brain. They can go, okay, so in this moment right now, I'm actually really safe. And then they can make decisions they want to be doing with their story. Even simple things like writing, like if they're journal writing, it takes people out of what the worry thoughts are and into writing it down and into the prefrontal cortex. And a really cool just little tip is gratitude. An attitude of gratitude reduces cortisol by about 22%. So writing gratitude, we can do that. Like, I'm really grateful to be in this space today, and it just feels nice to be connecting. Just little things like that, so we can just do small things each day that could, and they're simple things, like, because you can sit in that moment, that can actually take us into a different space. And then we start to write our story. What do I want to remember from this experience is, yes, of course, there's going to be some people struggling, and I don't want to dismiss that struggle that people are feeling, and that there will be parts of our stories that might be that as well. But what's some of the things in my control, where I looked at values, or we had family meals together and things like that. So there will be other parts of the story. It won't just be trauma, there'll be post-traumatic growth, and that's what we call it, I guess, in positive psychology. How can we grow?
And it's a... Oh, sorry, I was going to maybe just take some of those points, Jo, because they're quite, you know, if we're going from that position of maybe visualizing, creating, you know, our own, and understanding how our center is and how our business is, you know, that this business is an extension of the I, or the us in Sam and Dan's case. Now we're going to move out and try to create an ecosystem where I have collaborators of like-minded, you know, community of like-minded businesses. How was it for you guys, Sam and Dan? I know he's whistling in the background somewhere. But if I look at, if I look at Foodlosophy at the beginning, or at the sorry, everyone has to look at this unkempt-ness. But if I have my poster of Foodlosophy at the middle and I have my values here, how's that sort of been for you guys to go out and then connect with local farmers, local producers, and create that supply chain, or that little almost micro system around you guys, when you have other competitors like our Coleses and our Woolworths right there, you know, who are also going out there to local produce, and they're operating from different values, mass production versus quality and almost nurturing. So how's that been for you guys, creating that ecosystem of like-minded?
We thought we were going to be, at very first last year, we thought we might struggle a little bit with pulling people back. We sat on the idea of Foodlosophy for a good 5 years. And we just, you know, over 5 years, we sort of wrote things down and, you know, sat on the idea, and then we wrote some more down and we sat on it. And then we sort of finally came to the conclusion, okay, I think it's time to let it out of the box, so to speak. But when in that initial watching stage and sort of thing, I suppose we noticed, like everybody else, that everybody is very reliant on the big supermarkets, which has been extremely obvious over the last 2 months. And just the point of Coles and Woolies, for example, stopping their click and collect and stopping their home delivery unless you were, you know, quarantined, so to speak. Just those two things alone, and creating that fear around, oh my gosh, how am I going to get my groceries? that in itself, I feel, has been like a real big tipping point in our local community. And the local community has either gone, okay, well, I can't, you know, Woolies and Coles have let us down essentially, and they've gone, oh, hang on, well, actually, who else is around? And they've fallen back on all of those small businesses over the last 2 months that have been there all along, but they just been too blindfolded to realise. But for us, when we first started Foodlosophy, we honestly thought, oh, we're going to really find it difficult to pull people away. But it was really lovely. It was so nice to see how many people within the community went, well, actually, I don't really want to support Coles and Woolworths, but up until this point, I actually haven't been given a clear choice between anything else. And people are such, I suppose, creatures of habit, you know, like you just continue doing the same thing unless you're gone, someone else goes, hey, we're here. And they go, oh, well, hang on, I'll give that a go. So for us, it's great. And we've been embraced in that way by the community. And as I said, we take everything from what we do, and we don't look at ourselves and what we want. We flip it and we ask the community what they want from us. And then that's how we lead the business. And it's always been the same. So we've always used our social media to start the conversation and ask the questions, and then we go from there. But yeah, I don't know, the last 2 months before that, we've always been working with local businesses only. Anyone within the Southwest is what we were doing. But we've now probably doubled that over the last 2 months. So we've brought in a whole bunch of other businesses that we weren't using before and said, well, hey, you guys have, you know, whether it's like Blue Tractor Farm Eggs in Donnybrook. She used to supply a lot of her eggs to cafes, and of course with all the cafes and restaurants closed, well, we said, well, hey, we'll take your eggs and we'll distribute your eggs. Yeah, so same with a lot of things. Like we've got Cape Chauffeurs at the moment. He's delivering some of our meal boxes. He can't do his tours and his weddings and things like that, so we're going to fill up the car and he can take our boxes for us. So yeah, it's just it's been nice to see the community embrace, and I really, really, really hope that everyone continues to fall back on the small businesses that have saved us all, and not return to the old habit of shopping in the big two, so to speak.
And I think if anything, sorry, go on, Michael.
No, I was only going to say, I mean, that's probably indicative of, you know, many years or a backlog of us all kind of farming with this kind of mechanical, let's say, mechanical mind, and some of those techniques where we're only competing on price, essentially, which is probably, you know, speaking to farmers and those in the agricultural business, not necessarily how they would love to do it, but the market is demanding that. And you know, we can't bash down on Coles and Woolworths. They were also small one day, and now we have they've had the chance where they can support where they can. They just operate on a whole different level. Probably for cities and things like that, that machine helps. You know, that helps getting things, you know, to cities. We're lucky and fortunate out here in regional areas of Western Australia. But it does, for me, kind of hint on this this sort of global, you know, like this collective consciousness that around the world we start to see. You know, if we're seeing, you know, environmental movements, the discussion is getting louder and louder. We now have our local council signing the WALGA policies, and we're starting to see these shifts in global consciousness be a little bit more tangible. Is that something as well for you guys, Jo, as well as we're saying it can be braver as well, and we can, you know, those things that were going on in the back of our mind, and they're probably, I don't know, is that innate? Is that just innate in humans where we're starting to having to listen to ourselves a lot more because.
And I think this is the exciting part of this, and actually the opportunity. So when we look at, well, what are the opportunities we have right now? It's really to tune in. And what you're just describing there is almost like what we say is autopilot. So many people, and some of the positive psychology science looks at this actually, and it says that you know, people are in autopilot. day to day, just doing what they do. It's almost like we're mindlessly wandering through life in this kind of default. And we will go with what's easy because we're so overloaded and we're so busy, or were. So that might be for some of us and some not. And so what we will do is just, we're at capacity. I've got no more to give, so I'll just do what's easier. And what the science has found around that is that actually in the population, because positive psychology, I guess, looks at the scientific study on conditions and processes for well-being and flourishing, right? So we look at those ingredients. And they've found that about 20% of the population are flourishing, 80% are languishing, autopilot. So not stopping to tune in. What actually are my values? Oh, I have to do this to do that. I'll just go to Coles without thinking about what I'm doing, and Coles has been great as well, the machine, but I'm hearing what you say as well, Sam, as well, but just going, so what if I could sit with choice and intention? What might I do differently? And so it's a bit like we were talking about before, the vision. How might I now start to really live closer to what I want to do? And I think that part excites me when I see that. And I think that might be the growth, the collective, people coming back to, well, what really matters? People matter most. And, people include, our wellness, how we connect and all of those things. So I guess I sit in a place where I'm excited by some of that change.
Yeah, and it's interesting then, we might get to talk with a few maybe university in the education system, but for me that's something that sometimes comes back to this almost education system that we are, at least in the free market or as we live in, or maybe in the States, this sort of education where we're turning out students to operate almost in this system. We're teaching them now how to operate there and not be brave enough to be thinking for themselves almost and creating the new future. Is that you guys probably have different backgrounds there, and we probably need to speak to a few unis actually. We'll make that note, Matt, for next week to get on the show.
I feel that's a can of worms that's going to open up, which is great.
Yeah.
I don't mind opening worms. Yeah.
No, it's a personal
opening worms, letting the worms out.
Thing.
It's a personal favourite topic of mine, so absolutely.
But it comes back to mindset. So we're teaching young people to play to their strengths. So I do work with young people and teenagers as well. Play to your strengths, growth mindset, and that's huge. That offers up a huge range of potential as well. And, starting to uncover some of those self-limiting thoughts. So, okay, so such and such said there's no money in art. How true is that? Are we then limiting your potential by actually going, well, we can do art here today? It doesn't mean we have to look at the future and say that's what it's going to be. So people, I find, as adults, they might have had all of those self-limiting thoughts, and we do it from when the children first come into the world. How can we kind of pick apart that and just say, well, passion, because you were talking about your passion. People love passion. They love story. And so when you're going out into the community, Sam, with your story and sharing that, people are going to connect and engage with that. Oh, she's got this passion. How can I actually, be a part of that as well and be that collective and you've got that vision as well. So there's lots of different parts even just within that story. So we can actually do that in education. And there's a lot of schools that are starting to take up that with, positive psychology, strengths, resilience, mindfulness-based stuff, but just see more hope.
A couple of great, every week we have this, I just want to jump on those topics there. 2 topics I want to jump on there and throw this a little bit into your court, Sam. As we talked about arts and culture, Jo, it's, for me, I never saw a civilization build itself up, because we had, a barter system or markets and things like that. We invested in arts and culture, and that brought people together so that we could, enjoy our food or enjoy our time together. Sam, that's also a little bit in the philosophy for you guys, having a communal space where we could bring in together almost events and things. That's probably one part that obviously with social distancing doesn't work for you guys right now. And digitally, maybe we all love to watch eating. That's where everybody's eating the scene, but if we're doing that on Zoom calls where we're sharing food, that could be an interesting one. I don't know if you've got the communal eating session coming up.
we've actually, Dan and I have been discussing over the last couple of weeks. It's obviously, the world's changing daily at the moment, and restrictions are changing rapidly, whether they're increasing or decreasing, or what you can do and what you can't do. But we've had a lot of discussion over the last week or two about part of our future goal for Foodlosophy was, as we've said on our website, that we wanted to have a communal space, and we wanted to have family dinner nights and things like that. But for us, so it's like, well, we now have a communal space because we're at the yacht club, but we obviously can't start that section yet. So how can we share, I don't know, a slice of what we're intending to do now? And we've had discussions about, whether because we've added cooked meals to our services. So whether we on a Friday night say to everyone, right, well, this is the special that we're doing for the Friday night, it's $15 an adult or something like that. We'll deliver it to you, you reheat it, and then at 6 o'clock on the dot, we're all going to jump online and we're all going to eat as like one big happy community family. And we were also talking about getting one of the local musos to come in and then do like a pub session, basically live to our community, so that they still get that feeling of Friday night eat out music, but just in your own home.
Great. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
there is an app. There is a similar app that got brought out, like a platform that launched that. It's called House Party. And so you can literally load up all your contacts. You can do exactly that. So you could order, you'd say Foodlosophy meals, jump on at 6 o'clock, and then have theme nights. And you can also crash house parties as well. So if you see some of your friends having some, you can jump in and join that house party. So
that's hilarious.
Might be a good platform to launch back.
So those little, I mean, for everybody out there, there's all these ways of building products and services these days. A lot of psychology going into this as well, about behavioral science and how we can set challenges and you gamify. And I've been quite critical over my time, and I've done this for lots of companies, but it does create these almost addictions to these tools as well. I know that's the wrong time to sort of mention it, but Jo, you were talking about that earlier, where we might be, folks are starting to listen to themselves. Maybe we don't watch the news every night, but we might watch it every other night as well, to be able to listen to ourselves a little bit more and use it where we need the tool, rather than it being this default. It'll be quite disturbing, or maybe, this level of being, asleep. It must be quite worrying for you as a psychologist there, Jo, about how we kind of get people to snap out of that daze.
And I think that's it. And I think the more we have these conversations, we share these kind of messages with people and friends, and if we're in business, our staff as well, that we can, because I think about the long-term things that we're going to be faced with, and that's one of them. So if in a household of a family that news is in the background and you're seeing some of those images all the time, what is that doing to the young brain of the children watching? So I think they're going to be actually. We need to, so even if we find it hard ourselves to turn off as an adult, and go into, say, World Health Organization, or let's listen to what the local government are doing, for instance, things like that, and be really mindful and say, well, I'm actually only going to check every 2 days. Do I need to be? Yes, things are changing, but I think those legislation changes, they have a way of getting to us in business if we need them to as well. They find a channel without having all of that, because we think we need to find out that information, because it's like our brain's looking for that. How can I make sense of this? I'm stressed. There's these other stories, but what it's actually doing is more stress, more cortisol, adrenaline, and it's actually changing our brains. So the more we can switch off from that, actually the better. So if we think of our children, we think about, actually, is this actually improving my well-being today? How do I feel after watching the news for 5 minutes? You kind of set yourself some little social experiments and go, was that good? Was it actually useful? Did I find out something that was really important for my well-being or my family's well-being? Most people that I'm doing that with are saying no. They're actually able to say.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned as well, Sam, around we've been talking about almost choice there, Jo, where we're almost having this paradox of choice, where it's too much choice, there's too many channels. I know businesses down here, probably not just here, but we have so many little organizations, you know, which one is that one for? Do I need these guys? You know, it's about diversification. We talk about that in business as well as a way to protect your business, to diversify. But if everybody's then and having a niche, but how is that journey for a customer? It's quite confusing. And I really enjoyed hearing Sam as well for this Friday might be good, because you've got one choice. It's or maybe two. You know, you've got a vegetarian option, you've got a meat option. The choice is gone. So I know that I have a relationship and a trust with you guys. You make good food. You've sourced it from the right points. It's that decision and that connection that I want to have with a company or with a business. I want to connect with you on your values and your ethos. And then when you say this is dinner for Friday, I welcome that, because I've removed this choice from myself, and I can almost feel nourishment just in that. It's like I'm doing something good for myself. I've aligned myself with a great business, and I support that ethos, and now I'm doing something good for myself. More likely as well, we're talking about what businesses could do in this time. Matt and I have spoken about that a lot, is you know, using this time to build that connection with your customers.
Yeah.
That has been probably the most valuable work a lot of customers could be doing at the moment. And that's not about being out on social media and trying to be sensationalist. It's actually about reducing the noise and thinking of it to remove the choice. I've been keeping my little teacher's time out. Folks are starting to get to know my close-knit habit. You don't want to see the notes that I make around me at the moment. Jo, you might comment on that a little bit. I do that because I like to keep it so it's visual, right? I know that these notes are going to be here and I can arrange them around. That's why I use a Post-it. So I just wanted to get a little backup there from the psych.
Note taking, actually, because you think about information. If you come out, like I get people to do it even in psychology session, take notes, or what did you get from today? Because otherwise they'll go and they'll say, oh, there are all these things that Jo spoke about, but if you get your key points, whatever they are, it actually primes the brain, you know, that memory, and learning. It's so important. The more ways we hear information, because the brain, and especially if you think of, you know, the whole, the brain is plastic, and what we repeatedly do actually makes a difference to what we learn and then become with habits as well. You'll actually remember those important points. You'll go, oh, that's it, there it is, and then you can add more detail to it. So it's good for memory and learning. So was that enough in a nutshell of?
It was perfect, and it was perfect because I mean a practical tip out there for folks. And you may have heard Sam and Jo speaking. You'll have noticed that the language that they're using is not a solution-based or either. They talk about a question, and they set themselves questions, and these questions usually are, how might we, or how can I do it? If you take notes, and I take notes in a form which I stick this HMW, and then I can write any problem statements or even solution statements and try to reframe it as a question, because you then take the ceiling off what's possible, right? A lot of times it's like, well, we need to do social media, or will we need an app, or will we need to update our website? What do you want to do it for? What is, you know, what is the actual goal there? And almost jobs to be done. What is the job to be done as well? Think about that statement as well for your customers when you're designing any experience. It's just, what is the job that needs to be done here? And the tech is just a tool to kind of happen. Jo, I can see it. Go.
Just on that, like thinking about, that's your strength of curiosity. And when we think about character strengths, you know, everyone can pop online to the VIA online strengths survey, and just 24 different strengths. And it's really good to know your strengths. Ask yourself questions like that. How might I play to those strengths? Or are there some that I want to develop if they're not, you know, in the top 5? But curiosity, like when you actually become curious with things, you get deeper knowledge, and that's what your little questions are, I think. So I think that's probably one of your strengths there, is curiosity as well. So,
Well,
It's good.
it's awesome. It's a great. I'm gonna have these, Jo, every week, just recurring, because then that's a great free psychology service for me. Yeah, I know of the time we were a little bit late today. You guys are probably watching this video in sort of back. It's almost back to the future right now that we're living. So we're going to be posting this video up there. I did want to get to talk about this notion of grit, actually, with Jo and Sam. There's a great book by Angela Duckworth. It's one of those, yeah, there it is, great. Yeah, it's one of those books and almost notions which we can't really define, but it seems in a time like this, that this grit where you try something, and maybe Sam, you got some stories like we think we have an idea, we tried it and it just doesn't work. We just don't get take up. You know, nobody turns up to it. No, how much grit has gone into foodlosophy and you guys getting to where you guys are today?
A lot.
Yeah.
We hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. You sort of get to the point where you go, how much more can I take before I break and give it up? For us, I don't know, it's always been something that we've always said, right, well, what do we want to achieve? Why do we want to achieve it? And then as you've said, Jo, is like, what are those really core points of like, what is pushing you? What is driving you? What's the end goal? Why are you getting there? And never forgetting those. And it's like times like these where you have to go, you know, I've seen so many people go, oh, well, my business has lost everything. I'm just going to stop and I'm just going to shut up shop and I'm just going to go hide in a corner. And then when it's all over, I'll come back out again. But you just can't. You really can't. You need to just keep pushing through, and you need to keep communicating with those people that you've worked so hard to create a community around, and really keep connecting with them. Because if you stop, then they're just going to go, oh, well, you know, why, as you've said, like everyone's operating on default. So, you know, people, it's like, oh, okay, I'll pick up this app today, for example, on my phone. I'll just start playing this game. Oh, I'm hooked on this game for a while. And then when it gets boring, people delete it and they'll go to the next one. So you never want to like get to people to that point where they go, oh, well, you know, whatever. And they'll move on to the next thing. You've just got to keep that conversation rolling. And that's something that we've always reminded ourselves of. Like, gosh, I can't tell you how many times we've been knocked down, or we've gone, oh, we're going to do this and this is the goal, and we think we find the perfect solution, and then something happens and it all just falls apart. You just got to get up and find a new way. So I don't know, and as you said, you know, connecting with people, connecting with your customers on a basic level and creating that relationship with them and building that trust, that's what they buy. They don't buy your product, they buy you.
That's it.
So it's
this
just
brand is really, and you notice that, I noticed that in Australia, this I'll give it a go. We have such an entrepreneurial spirit, actually. It's in Aussie's DNA. Been a lot of time in Europe, and folks thinking at, you know, young sort of 20-odd-year-old who's come out and had 3 businesses, had a whatever career. It's like, you know, what are they doing down in Australia? But it's in our DNA to just have a go, and I still love that. But it is interesting how many sort of businesses or ideas that people just like flick through could add up to be causing a little bit of a sense of, where's my self-worth actually, if that idea didn't quite work, that idea didn't quite work, that idea didn't quite work. And we're in this period, and it might be happening all above us, you know, in the Europes and the Americas and all of that right now. We're down here like developing some sort of sense of, you know, personal brand. This is the discussion going on. I'm not such a fan of tapping into that, but I am a big fan of this sort of Japanese vibe, or Japanese notion of ikigai, you know, almost like this purpose, you know. And as you were chatting there, I was just wondering, how might we create a business ikigai? And that would be, for those folks listening out there, you almost need to find that Venn diagram, you know, that sweet spot in the middle of, you know, what do I like doing? What does my community really need? And then what will my community pay for? Now, somewhere in there, in the sweet spot of there, that looks like a big pear, but somewhere in there, you could find your own business ikigai. You can do that for yourself. That's probably a good step to finding that with your business. But I would encourage businesses out there to get all of that input from their teams as well. If not now, you know, we talked about, you know, hiring maybe for EQ. Now businesses are hiring for EQ. That's something I've heard Jo speak a little bit about, this emotional intelligence in business. There could be something in that as well, to discovering a way to keep your business viable.
And it's really interesting because I mentioned before we got live, you know, just one of the Wellbeing Lab reports that recently came out, and it was actually completed on a population, obviously, of the workforce. And what they actually found, and it was in mid-March, and so some of the findings are making some pretty good suggestions around people's happiness and wellbeing at work. And there's some people that aren't feeling safe to actually, I guess, share and communicate their feelings. So I think, and that plays into the whole emotional intelligence. And if there was just one way that workplaces, because I think everyone's caught up in so much change, could actually check in with their staff maybe and do, because we used to say, and you've probably heard me say this, Michael, you can't check your emotions at the door, and especially not now. And so if there's a way to check the emotions at the door, and there's a really cool, really simple neuroscience hack, and we could do it in forums like this, we could do it in staff meetings, or staff could simply come in, and they call it mental dumping. So, and people call it different things. I really like that, because it's like, okay, so I'm coming into work, if I have a workplace to go to, and I'm just feeling overwhelmed with family or whatever, and I go, man, I'm like 8 out of 10 stressed right now. And what that does, we find, it's kind of like a self-validation tool, because we'd want to do that with others, wouldn't we? I can see you're feeling really stressed right now, Sam, or, you know, you're really calm in the storm there, Matt, you know, whatever that might be. Validation has a way of calming the brain, and we can do that in real time and actually watch and observe people's brains. But what we find is that it dumps it, and it allows us to get on with the task as well. So it puts the brakes on the stress response. So even if it was a simple tool like that we could use ourselves, or we could use in businesses, because that's the thing that people are saying, like, people are really worried about their jobs, so they don't want to share their feelings. Well, you know, there's going to be people competing for jobs, and this is what some of the study and research found as well. So people, they're in a place of fear, they don't want to share their feelings and things like that. So even if business could do just that, just a simple tool, which is a good part of emotional intelligent leaders as well, offering that up.
Great. Well, guys, I really could talk. You've probably heard my beeper, my teacher beeper go off. I know it goes out. I put another 5 minutes on there just to wrap that up. We at the Chamber as well have been working together with local photographer Russell Barton as well. He's had a great chat with Sam and Dan, and he's followed them around and created a nice little story. We're going to post that on our YouTube channel there. Thanks for Matt at Luke too, giving us a hand there as well. So we're going to post that out. That's a series of videos that we'd like to tell. We'd like to tell the stories of local businesses doing well by doing good. And you'll see a new video hopefully every week come out on our YouTube channel. So I do encourage you, Matt, let's stick the link in today's show notes as well on Facebook, but also hopefully as well, Sam and Dan at Foodlosophy, that will also bring a lot of awareness. We'll share it out to your channels as well, speaking of social media, just to get that story out. And Jo, thanks so much for your time and your insight. As I say, we could follow this up every week. Sam as well, congratulations on all the success of Foodlosophy, and reach out anytime that we can help you guys as well.
Cool.
Thank you so much for having me on here. It's been really nice. Thank you for sharing.
You're all really welcome. And Matt, man, those technical difficulties, you were the epitome of calm there, trying to get this video out.
On the outside, it was calm. It wasn't calm on the inside.
There's a really nice, I guess, do you know Glenn Close? He wisely said, what mental health needs is more sunlight, more candor, and more unashamed conversation. So I think that's what we had here today. So
fantastic.
Yeah. Radical candor, that's what we need, guys. There's a book in that, and I think Kim Scott wrote it, so I can talk about that as well. Radical candor. Yeah, thanks so much for having a candid conversation. There's more where that came from at the Busselton Chamber. I can't do it any other way. Sorry, folks. Be lucky I had that shirt on, you know. It's going to be as candid as it can get it. But thanks so much, Matt. You'll probably hit the end. But we're sorry for all of the audience out there. We couldn't take those questions. Do fire them through.
Yeah.
You can ask us anything.
I
would pass those on to Jo and to Sam, and I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions about their journey so far through the COVID outbreak. And we'll be back next week on the Busselton Chamber Ask Me Anything session. Oh, there's that teacher's alarm as well.
See you guys.
Hooroo, guys.
Ciao.